Hi, Jen. This set of scales looks good. You have the gist of things. Now, be aware that there's a little flaw in Photoshop, probably goes for Illustrator too, where blues sometimes look purple. I do believe that your hue is fixed here, despite the way things may look. I noticed, though, that in the leftmost boxes, you don't have exact RGB values. For each. In other words, they look similar, but they're not identical, those leftmost boxes. Also, on right in tints, you want to have a pure white, and that's going to be 255, 255, 255. Those are the R, G, and B values that you can actually type into the color picker. Now, for black, that's going to be 000. Hello, Erin. Things look very good with your scales. It looks as though all three boxes at left have the very same RGB values. Now notice that on right in tints, you want to have a pure white. That's going to be 255, 255, 255. Those are the red, green, and blue values that you can actually type into the color picker. For black, it's 000. Your interval seems good. This is really a pretty nice set of scales. Gradation and hue. Well, the real problem we have there is that there's not a very good gradual transition. You've got saturated hues, but they don't gradually transition. Also, I'll say that I find color theory works best with no outlines, when we can see the color alone without the black border corralling it in. We get a better sense of what the colors are doing. So see my no stroke instruction. Maybe I'll email that to you. So when we look at gradation of value, that's pretty good. The only thing is your hue isn't fixed. Now, actually, what you've got for gradation and saturation would be a good part two. Hi, Kendall. This is a nice job with your scales. In fact, yellow is a very hard color to work with. I can see that you got the same color in all leftmost boxes. On right at top in tints, you want to make sure you have a perfect white and a perfect black. And gee, I think you've just about got those. In tones, you want the value to be constant, and that is hard with yellow. I think your tone scale gets gradually darker toward the right. Now, let's see. In gradation of hue, your colors are all fully saturated. Good job there. The only thing is that we don't see a real gradation. That is, there's not a gradual transition between the colors as you'd see on a rainbow. Gradation of value is quite good. Now, gradation of saturation is meant to use a fixed palette with just one hue. Danielle, this is a really nice body of work this week. With scales, I'd have to say that's just about perfect. Maybe tones gets a little light in value toward the right, which would mean that value wasn't entirely fixed or constant. But gee, it's a really good job. Now, when I look at your gradation of hue, those big shapes do transition subtly. But the contrast of the small shapes inside the big shapes, sort of like the pimento inside the olives, is such that it foils the idea of a gradation or a gradual transition just a little bit. Well, I think your gradation of value is fantastic, and gradation of saturation works well too. One little thing, we want to get to the point where we can control the software so that, for instance, the three leftmost boxes would be identical. You can either use the color picker to pick from the last one you worked with, or find its RGB values and just type them in. Let's see, there's a little problem with fluctuation in hue. Like if we look at tints, on the left we've got a blue, which is a little more like a standard or royal blue, but then the tint on the right is more a tint of a cyan blue, which is actually a different hue, but that's getting a little nitpicky. Now let's look at the assignment, for example, you've got here. Well, the first large circles, those are all fully saturated, and that seems to me the gradation in hue. But in the center, where we start getting the cyan turning into a tint, that's actually a gradation of value. Hello, Nina. I can see that you're quite in control of the software and also the concepts. Just a couple of little things here in gradation of hue. Your hues are not all fully saturated. Pick from the top right corner of the color picker. And yellow is a hard color to work with. When I use the grayscale test on your gradation of saturation, the value is not entirely constant. Hello, Vicky. Good job on your scales. Looking here at the gradation of hue, well, these colors are not fully saturated. Pick from the top right corner of the color picker. Also think about gradual transition. I think you got that working better in the gradation of value, which is actually an excellent piece. In gradation of saturation, well, you do have a gradation of saturation. The only thing is the assignment also asked for fixed value. Hello, Angie. Your work is very competent here, and I like to see the variety of your design ideas in assignment 4. Hello, Kimberly. This is very good work. There is a nice interval between all of your steps in scales. The only thing is, I don't think you have a perfect white or black, and you can use the RGB values in the color picker to type those in. That's 255, 255, 255 for white, and 000 for RGB values for black. Now, gradation of hue. Well, there your colors aren't fully saturated, and we don't see a gradual transition so much either. Although I really do like that design, and I'll say for all of these that you have had a heyday with circles. I'm really entertained by all you've been able to do with circles. I might have gotten this wrong, but I think that the turquoise example would be better for gradation of value, and the blue one would be better for gradation in saturation. Vicky, you've done a very nice job with your scales. Looking here at gradation of hue, well, we needed a gradual transition, and also it would have been good to have fully saturated colors. Pick those from the top right of the color picker. Now, I think I got your gradation of saturation on the left when it should have been on the right, because that's actually part 3. That works well. And the gradation of value, then the yellow one is fine too. Well, Megan, you show a pretty good understanding of the concepts with your work here. Now, remember, in tints, you're only adding white, not gray. So somehow you ended tints with a gray, and what we really need there is a white. So if you pick from the top edge of the color picker, all of those colors there are tints. And with shades, things look pretty good, except you want to end it in pure black, which is R0, G0, B0. And with tones, if you want a perfect gray at the end, that's what you should have. All 3 of the values should be the same. Red, green, and blue should all be identical numbers. Now, the gradation of hue looks okay. Gradation of value is pretty good, although I would say that your hue is not as fixed as it could be. You've got maybe a cyan green and then a green. With the gradation of saturation, you want something a little more like your tone scale. That means go from the hue toward gray. Hi, Kat, your scales look good. Make sure that you end with white and be in control of making white when you need it, right? So red, 255, green, 255, blue, 255. You can type those numbers in the color picker. You'll see toward the bottom right corner, and black should be 000. Now, I don't see very much change in your assignment 4 from the draft phase, so I'm going to refer you to my notes in drafts. Derek, that is one exemplary set of scales. Good work there. With gradation of hue, you are meant to have saturated colors. Pick those from the top right of the color picker field. For example, a pink is a tint that is desaturated. Also, work at drawing perfect circles. Release shift last when you're drawing circles. Gradation of value looks good. Gradation of saturation is pretty good. The value is pretty constant there.